and welcome to the Cars Billington Proud to Farm podcast. We're here today at Harper Adams University, and we've got a special podcast for you on protein efficiency. We've got some of the experts within our business and the experts on site here to debate this. So we've got Dr. Grace Smith, we have David Howard from our Southern sales team, and we've got Dan Humphries, who's the vet on site here.
So we're sitting here just at the milking parlour at Harper Adams, and we're joined again by David Howard and also Dan Humphries this time, who is not wearing any physical hat, but wears a couple of literal, metaphorical hats. Dan, what's your role here at Harper?
So my name's Dan Humphries. I'm a dairy vet by trade, and through Horizon Dairy Vets we do the vetting for the farm here, but I also have a consultancy business on the side which is called Dairy Insight, and I work with lots of farms all over the world and also agri-businesses that support them.
Okay, and I believe you both can work together quite closely on the rationing and nutrition at Harper Adams, is that right?
How closely? How close? That's the question.
Too closely? Is
too
that
closely.
a good answer?
Yeah, we do have a lot of conversations about fibre, Dan, and the finer points of amino acids and so on. So, yeah, but I suppose maybe, Grace, the point there is that the interaction between health and nutrition is a very strong link, isn't it? And I think if we have one skill set, Dan, between the two of us, our communication tends to be pretty good. With certainly, it's a good. There's a good conversation always between the health of the animals, what's happening there, the effect of the ration, and sort of optimizing what we're doing, as well as obviously with the wider team as well.
It's important that everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, isn't it? Because ultimately we want these cows to be productive, healthy, and economically sustainable as well. So
Absolutely. And without exception, the best performing farms I work with, I have a good relationship with the nutritionist. Because if you're ever just looking at a problem from one viewpoint, you're only going to see one set of answers, and it might not be the same for everyone. So you do need those different viewpoints. And to try and look at health and performance and stuff from my side of things without considering the major financial cost, the major input into the system, is just madness.
Yeah.
But the flip side, if you just look at the nutrition and you don't see what the outcomes are in terms of our health, our fertility, and all those things, that's also madness. So you do need to join those dots up. And I think in terms of for client services, it's just a must. The client doesn't get anywhere near the value out of the advisory team unless that advisory team actually works together as a team.
Yeah, I think when both parties kind of get over the initial hurdle of maybe thinking that they're going to be working against each other, it does add a lot of value. And I've started doing that on quite a few customer farms, and it does add quite a bit of value to all parties, I think. So this is obviously a kind of unique situation in that it's a university farm, but also a dairy herd. So what are the kind of key metrics that you guys are looking for when you're rationing these cows?
It's a good question, that one. And it's an answer that's evolved over time and will continue to evolve, I think is fair. I think when David and I started working together with the team here in Kate at Harper, the first thing was to actually start to achieve the levels of performance that we wanted to achieve just in terms of milk output. And it was just over a year and a half ago now, we went to 3 times a day milking, and we've seen that we've been able to get the yields that we've been trying to get to, but now we've turned on its head fairly recently, and we've started to move towards rationing for income over feed cost. As opposed to pure production, we actually want to see the maximum income over feed cost per cow per day, which in early lactation does mean let's get these cows producing as much as possible, but then it actually shifts very much to an efficient feeding system.
Just on them, just to put a bit of a definition in there for income over feed cost. I guess we've traditionally, in a lot of the costing systems, we've looked at margin over purchase feed for a lot of years then. But if I was to give it a very blunt, and you can maybe flesh this out a little bit, money left after feed paid for, including forage? Or how would you expand? How would you?
Yeah, we've got to include the forage costs in there. I think any kind of feeding system where we don't include the cost of the forage is really missing a massive part of the thing. And we want to, there's 2 different things. One of the big important splits is the definition between cost and value, because we want our forages to have a different value to what they cost. If they value the same as they've cost, it's barely break even. Mm-hmm. If they value less than what they cost us, it's not a good idea. So we actually want to be able to value our forages properly. And unless we actually do the ration costs completely, we won't really do that. And the drive that is outside in the industry of make the best quality forage you've got, you can, because it will decrease the stuff that you actually have to buy in. For that, you do need to be looking at the whole picture. So income over feed cost includes everything we feed to the cows.
And takeaway as well. So
and the refusals.
Yeah, weighed out refusals. And I suppose, again, from a nutritional perspective, the one thing, we get into the finer points of protein, nutrition, and amino acids and all this stuff. But actually, measuring intake is actually quite hard. To estimate how much is our cow eating in a day, especially it's a TMR system here as well.
Okay.
So there's nothing fed through the milking parlour. And the rations are set up. Then we basically feed to the milking cows. We've got a dry cow ration, which is ration number 1. We've got a fresh stroke first lactation heifer ration, and that's because we were walking around earlier, Grace, I was showing you they're in one run together. So we try to have a ration that's matched to their needs. Then we've got a high stroke mid lactation ration, and then we've got a low yield group as well. So one of the things that's been really interesting to look at is we've been starting to use a system that looks at a lot of data points in a lot of detail called AlgaMilk. So I'm teeing you up nicely there, Dan, for a few insights on AlgaMilk. And that is very much, again, from my perspective, like looking at the dry matter intake, per group, per group every day has been really interesting, and some of the differences.
I think we can often forget about dry matter intake, isn't it? Really, in terms of nutrition, it just about trumps everything. Because I often say to clients, it doesn't matter the minutiae of the diet. If your cows simply can't access enough or get enough intake, then we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. So just before we come back to AlgaMilk, take a few steps back. So if we think about income over feed cost, how has your rationing changed since that's the kind of key metric that you've been using? Have you noticed anything that's drastically changed since you've switched at that focus?
So I'll let David fill in on the minutiae, the detail on this in a minute. You get yourself ready.
My best.
One thing we've really started to drive towards is the efficiency of protein utilisation. Protein being the most expensive part of the ration is how can we be really efficient with the ingredients that we've got that supply protein into cows? And does every cow in every stage of lactation need the same resources? No. So we've worked quite hard to try and tailor the ration to where cows are. We have some external factors here that make things a little bit more difficult. We've got a trial going on at the minute, so we've moved a load of cows out of our standard rationing into something else. So we're constantly having to evolve and do what we do differently. But our real target is matching the nutrient supply to the nutrient requirement at stage of lactation.
Okay.
I've had a minute to think now, so to formulate an answer. So I think probably the best, just to add to it, and again, still thinking about income over feed cost. I think if you go back probably, maybe 12 months, we fed one diet to all milking cows. And how that's changed in the last, since we started to look at the figures in a lot more detail, is we now have, as I said, we've got 3 milking rations now. So when you're driven by income over feed cost, you start to really think about your mid to late lactation cows that are pregnant. Like the nutrient requirement for those cows is massively different to a fresh cow, for example. And hence why we've got 2 separate diets set up for those. And equally, your high ration then. So when we're thinking about an animal that's coming up to peak milk and trying to get in calf and minimize the amount of body condition loss. Again, there's 3 very, very different scenarios. So
you're not trying to ration for the average cow, because ultimately when you do that, there's very few that actually are at that average, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Averages can be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. There's what we really want is we want to actually enable cows to have a tighter performance as possible, that distribution curve to be as narrow as possible, because then we really can target the feeding. One thing I always think it's important to differentiate is feeding for income over feed cost is not the same as least cost formulation. It is to make sure we're getting the value from the ingredients that we choose to do. And by splitting different options, we can feed performance ingredients to some groups and not others. Yeah. And that's certainly something we're looking into as our sort of like next step. We're looking at some of the things that will improve microbial protein. We're looking at the things that we could supply amino acids directly and drop crude protein further. So those are expensive things. People look at the headline cost of those ingredients and go, God, I don't want to pay that. Milk prices falling off a cliff at the minute. What can I cut? When actually those could be investments that really do push up income over feed cost, provided we can target them well.
Yeah, it's delivering value, isn't it, and return on investment. And I think current feed prices, if you look at it on a percent of protein, can range from £7 to maybe £12 a tonne, depending on the source and the quality of that protein. So it can have a huge impact on feed cost. Not to mention, I guess farmers are well aware that we are under pressure to become more sustainable in terms of environmental impact, which also protein has a huge impact on as well. So there's a multi-pronged attack to why we need to sort this protein efficiency out. So looking at the different stages of lactation, how have you found, what's the current state of affairs here in terms of protein efficiency of the herd?
So overall, I think the figures from yesterday were about 32% efficiency of protein utilisation. So of all the protein we put into the cows, 32% comes back out as milk protein. And the herd's average today was 3.5% milk protein, which is very good for here. That's
record,
not really,
I
think that is a record for here
It's a record,
we can break that down into groups, and usually you actually get more efficient protein utilisation in high-yielding cows in fresher cows than you do in stale cows. That's the same with quite a lot of nutrients.
Yeah.
So we do track that over time. And not that long ago, when we moved from kind of the single ration system, we started at about the 25, 26%. And that would be very typical of a dairy farm in the UK and elsewhere, actually. The top end, which is one of the worries, really, when we're talking about nitrogen use, really, the top end of a cow's efficiency is about 35% in a group of cows, of what goes in. You can make that number artificially higher if they mobilise a load of their own protein.
Yeah.
But that's not what you want. So being able to sustain somewhere around the 32, 33 is very good. And that will be our challenge, is actually maintaining that efficiency of protein utilisation.
Perhaps a slight tangent to this, but I just came into my mind. It seems that there's been a little bit of a resurgence of interest in extended lactations. So how do you think that fits in terms of, you've just said that those fresh cows have the highest protein use efficiency. So what's your opinions on extended lactations in terms of how it would affect that?
It's a good question. I haven't ever looked at it in terms of an efficiency of protein utilisation thing. What we're doing with extended lactations is when we're really maintaining high milk yields for a little bit longer. I think the circumstances you want to do that, we don't commonly hit in the UK. Like in terms of, you would be looking at individual lactations of 14, 15,000 kilos regularly, rather than just the odd cows that are doing it. I think what we're really trying to do currently is maintain a reasonable lactation length, not bringing it super short or anything. So we probably are talking about 385 days calving interval, all the time between calvings in herds now, or in high-yielding herds now, but getting that cow back into peak high performance as often as possible.
Yeah. It's that most efficient time of its life.
If I was being cynical on that one, is it almost accepting that, because I understand the logic with the extended lactation, but are you almost accepting the fact, we struggle to get high production Holstein cows? Because again, if your peak, especially on 3 times a day milking, or especially on robots, is, instead of it being between day 70 and 90 as you'd expect in twice a day milking, it's more like you're between day 40 to 45, almost around exactly the time that you're thinking about inseminating that cow for the first time. But I still, stand by my beliefs. I do think high production cows can still get in calf. They can still have that success divorced insemination if all of the other fine tuning is correct.
Yep.
So Grace, can I ask you a question? In terms of, so our geography is a little bit spread out. So we're here in Shropshire today, but you're based obviously further north, up in Scotland. What are the things the farmers are asking you at the moment? Is protein, specifically soya, an issue for them, or are they looking at options on other sources?
Yeah, so I think linking back to a point that Dan made, there's increasing scrutiny of our sourcing of high protein products such as soya. So there are some milk producers who prohibit the use of soya, or others that are definitely incentivising a reduction of it. So customers are looking for alternatives, whether that be increasing protein from forages or other complementary feedstuffs. I think I'm so far south I almost got a nosebleed when I was coming down the M6 yesterday. But I think one of the challenges that we have in the west coast of Scotland is we're probably growing better and better silages, but they have an increased protein content.
Because there's a big attraction to multi-cut, isn't there?
Yeah, a big attraction to multi-cut. So we get these high crude protein silages, easily 16 16.5% crude protein. Some of the multi-cut guys will be getting up to nearly 18% protein. And then it's how do we balance that? How do we make sure that that protein that we've feeding that cow is actually not being used? Because the nitrogen use efficiency or protein use efficiency can sound like a scary term, but really it means of the protein that we're feeding that cow, how much of it's been turned into milk. And at the end of the day, all dairy farmers, they want to know how much milk am I going to produce and what quality it's going to be. So if we can take these terms and make them a bit user-friendly, it's nothing to be scared of. It's just basically the resources that you've got on farm, are we getting the best use of it? So there's definitely the drive from the sustainability point of view of supermarkets and processors, and their concerns really are about deforestation, loss of habitats, and also importing from across the world. So I suppose another thing that's important to our customers is looking at the feed costs, and if we can produce diets with lower crude protein, we can insulate them from some of the global fluctuations in protein prices.
Grace, you had a fantastic description this morning when we were walking around here about describing how you'd explain to a farmer what on the efficiency side, about the delivery. You were using the analogy of the Amazon delivery.
Yeah, so I do a lot of online shopping. It usually goes to my neighbour's house because I'm out visiting farmers and cows. But what happens, if you order something from Amazon, what you really want is whatever you've ordered. So it could be
the little thing.
A little thing, but it tends to come in quite a big package. So what I'm talking about in terms of efficiency of use is a lot of customers and a lot of nutritionists, the way that we've been rationing cows in the past has been to target a specific crude protein level. So a lot of customers will say, I want my crude protein, we need to have 17 protein, 18 protein to drive milk yield. If we think about it from a cow's perspective, it doesn't actually have a requirement for that crude protein. What it has a requirement for is an amino acid. So if we link back to the Amazon analogy, you've ordered, I don't know what you've ordered, say a watch, something relatively small from Amazon, and you arrive home and you've got a huge box the size of a small house, and what you need to get all the wrapping off, and then there's a valuable thing inside that you actually want. What happens to all the other packaging? You ended up going your recycling bin, take it to the dump, whatever you need to do. It costs you energy to get rid of that. So think about it in terms of cows. What we want is the amino acid. And traditionally, what we've done to supply that amino acid is feed more and more levels of crude protein.
Overall, oversupply
crude protein. Yeah. And the crude protein is like the packaging that the amino acid comes in. And what that means, if we think about having to take the cardboard to the dump or having a bonfire, whatever, it means that we're expending energy to get rid of that packaging. So yes, we are getting what we want at the end of the day, but the cow is actually having to use energy to get rid of the excess protein. And I think that's when we moved to rationing cows for increased efficiency, we get a sort of double whammy. They're getting a better balance of protein, but they're also not wasting energy and getting rid of that excess protein.
I think one other thing, and you hit the nail on the head really, is that accumulation of waste product is a problem. That excess nitrogen we have to deal with as well. So it's not only the cow that has the problem in converting the waste and getting rid of it in urine or in milk, urea nitrogens, or in muck, but we have to deal with it. And we're coming under more and more pressure. And if you go to other parts of the world or even other parts of the country, even Wales, for example, that nitrogen.
Yeah, nitrate vulnerable zones in Northern Ireland. I think the whole of the country's a nitrate vulnerable zone. So we've got the consequences environmentally. And then also there are consequences for cow health, aren't there? Can you maybe expand a bit on what, if we were consistently overfeeding protein, what would you expect to see in terms of health and fertility?
So the first thing really is, I don't find too many rations get to the level of toxicity now, but you're entirely right. If we've got excess protein, it needs handling, it needs breaking down, it needs excreting, which requires energy. So they have to get rid of that excess. It doesn't just stay anywhere. They have to do it. So energy that we could be using for maintenance, for body condition maintenance, for the immune system, for milk production, for growing a pregnancy, that's diverted away to just dealing with rubbish, dealing with stuff they have to get rid of. If you really do start to overload the system and these processes, then the waste builds up within the cow. They can't get rid of it fast enough. And you can actually change the uterine environment. You can change ovarian function. So you can change the way their reproductive system works. That means you get a fertility impact. You can get poorer fertility with higher proteins. There's also, this one's a bit more contested because different studies have seen different things, but you can see at times where like excess protein might cause hoof health to deteriorate. You might start to see horn growth quicker. There's also compounding factors, or you might have looser muck, so you've got more contamination in the environment, you've got more muck on tails, you've got more digiderm starting from cows standing in muck, you've got more mastitis and cell count issues because there's a lot of muck flying around the place that you have to deal with as the farmer.
I suppose the classic example of that is when cows go out in the spring and it's a dangerous place to be in the pit of the parlour.
The brown shower.
Yeah. It also links back to, because I think it's quite an interesting point, depending on what metrics of sustainability you're looking for. In terms of some milk suppliers are looking at reducing, improving nitrogen use efficiency. And that's really getting down to the detail, which we'll come back to here, of the minutiae of that diet. However, another approach to mitigating like the carbon footprint of farms is having more extensive grazing systems. But I guess that could be a challenge as well, because generally when they're grazing that pasture in early spring, the protein will be very high. Is there a challenge there in managing body condition of those cows and also fertility? Because they generally tend to be block calvers as well, isn't there?
We certainly see patterns in the blocks, in the spring blocks over the years. And I think one place we've got to now is in early season, do not do anything that will compromise your fertility. So if milk price is low, we still have to do the same things that mean we're going to get the herding calf. Because if we don't get the herding calf in that time, then the next few years are crucified. So we've also started to see some patterns where people have really started to understand the role of complementary feeding as opposed to supplementary feeding. Feeding them more versus feeding them what they need to make use of the diet. So we've seen more, when we've got lots of lush grass and things like that, we don't need an 18% cake in the parlour. We might actually need something with some starch to enable them to utilise the protein, or something that's actually a bit more like nutritionally improved straw that might slow it down so the grass spends longer in the rumen.
So going back to this herd here, Harper Adams, so what forages are you guys working with here? And then we can talk about the complementary feeds to match that. So I assume with my journey down south, I would assume we would have quite a bit of maize silage in the diet here. Is that right?
It's that's the majority component of the forage then. So again, on the average then across all the milking groups, 65% of what they eat is what's grown here. And that's been it's a figure that we've really pushed at over the last couple of years. So Chris Ruffley is the operations and crops manager on the farm here, and his team do a tremendous job on focusing on forage quality, as well as obviously having enough, which has been quite topical this year. But in the milking ration, the majority of what yes, I said 64% is forage to concentrate. And of the forage fraction then, the majority is made up of maize. I think about 11 kilos dry matter, certainly to the highs anyway. And that's followed by grass silage, so second cut silage at the moment. And that was a real good quality of second cut. But the other interesting crop that is not grown widely is lucerne.
Okay.
And Chris and his team have done a tremendous job. I think Chris has been growing lucerne for over
years now.
Yeah, 12 years plus. And has really got it down to a fine art. So we'll take about 3 cuts a year. And that's mixed with clover. So it gives you a product in the end. It's all ensiled, it's all clamped. And it gives you something that is about 19% protein with a really nice fibre profile to it as well. So if the job in terms of rumen efficiency is slowing the throughput of what's going through the cow, it does a real good job there, as well as supplying another source of protein then as well. So and that drives, the big goal there is milk from forage, and that really drives it feed conversion efficiency overall. Yeah,
although I guess a lot of UK farmers won't have it in their diets. I think they regard it as the holy grail of, if you only could have lucerne. A lot of state in the States and mainland Europe have it quite a lot.
It depends on geography a bit as well, doesn't it? It's like you've got to grow what your farm can sustain in.
Yeah.
And, it's looking at your soil type and your geography and trying to grow something that suits your own farm, So on that, I was going to ask a question actually of you. In terms of homegrown protein then, so we mentioned about lucerne, is there anything, Grace, with the farmers you work with, is there anything they're looking at in particular about, there's a bit of work on sort of like peas and beans and lupins and all this stuff, or grass lays and red clovers, anything topical for your farmers a bit further? No?
So we There are some people sort of around the edges doing a bit of work. It's an interesting point, actually, because maybe I've got a slightly different opinion on it. I do work with quite a lot of grass-based systems, and I think one of the most efficient ways to produce protein, again, in the west coast of Scotland, is actually to focus on just good grass silage.
Yep, for sure.
I think the interest in other types of products probably comes from more environmental schemes and looking at herbal lays and things. I haven't seen anyone consistently making higher quality protein on farm. I think some of the university and college farms in Scotland have done that for a number of years, but I don't see it as being widespread yet. But I think it's certainly something to look at. I will need to defer to my agronomy colleagues on the growing of it. But yeah, I think we can, maybe I had negative points about grass silage earlier, but we do often forget that it is actually one of the most efficient ways of getting protein into a cow as well, isn't it?
And it's accessible to most farms, wherever you are in the UK as well.
Yeah.
It's almost like we do get a fair bit of rainfall, which we love to complain about, but there's a lot of parts of the world that don't get, that enables us to have, to grow grass, doesn't it? So without getting into the more complicated things, one thing, and we spoke about earlier was on the farm here, we obviously always pushing the boundaries to improve things, and I think the role is for the research institutes is to show best practice, but also not afraid to make a mistake either. Do you remember we grew soya, Dan, here a few years ago?
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that because it didn't work.
Yeah.
And it was looking at a variety of soya that was, in theory, should ripen earlier. So it was quad zero variety soya. I think we grew about 12 acres of it.
Well, way back when, I grew up on a dairy farm in Dumfriesshire, and we had the 40-acre field, obviously called a very inventive name, and we grew peas and beans, and Dad would give us a fiver if we could find a bean in it. So there's hopefully been some advances.
So it looked like it had a lot of stuff in it, but it wasn't the specific bits that you were potentially looking for. So again, I mean, the point there is, stick to what we're good at, and growing grass is pretty accessible to most people.
And going back, what can you do with the ration to make the best use of that protein in the grass?
Yeah.
Because if you're limited by the supply, then surely we want to be as efficient with what we're putting in as possible. So what can we do that enables the maximum utilisation of the proteins from grasses?
I think one of the key things that we often forget is, or can be guilty of forgetting, is ultimately we're feeding a ruminant. So primarily we need to keep that rumen population happy, and anything we do to improve that rumen environment is going to have a knock-on positive effect on rumen efficiency, whether that's of energy or protein. So I would be also looking to make sure that when we've got protein readily available in the rumen, we also need energy available. So I think one of the main strategies of improving microbial protein would be improving starch supply, optimizing starch supply. We have quite a high starch content in the diet here, I would imagine.
Yeah, with the fact that the maize makes up the majority component of the ration, then it certainly is.
It's sort of rumen-friendly starch as well, isn't it? Because it comes in a forage form. For
sure, exactly, yes. It's mostly supplied through the forage maize then, but we do top up with a ground maize source then as well.
So one of the things that nearly every dairy farmer will get on a daily basis is notification of the milk urea nitrogen in his milk. So what can we use that information for, and what should we be looking at in terms of what can we improve going forward?
That's a good question, Grace. And I get it. It's a good point as well, because we've spoken about calculations for the efficiency of protein utilization or the milk. But the milk urea itself is a real good sort of like starting point, I suppose. And that's not every farm milk records, but everybody gets milk quality test daily or weekly for payment. So, and on that, you've got your fat protein, you've got your somatic cell count, you've got your Bacta scan, and the figure that probably a lot of people skip is the urea. And basically, so there's a target there. I mean, I think the number that I would always think about is 200 on milk urea, but plus or minus 25 points maybe on either side of 200. So again, the logic there is that think about your spring grass situation, your massive oversupply of protein there. So you would expect those cows to try to get rid of excess protein in the form of milk urea. So that's an interesting figure, I think, to monitor. And in terms of sort of other aspects of ration balance, that there are numbers within the rationing systems, whichever ones we use, that will give us predictions of and really Dan mentioned it earlier, is the ability of the microbial of the bugs to produce their own microbial protein, because that is where the vast majority of protein comes from. But in terms of probably going forward, like again, we touched on amino acids earlier. Dan, have you got thoughts on the role of amino acids then being quite specific in protein nutrition?
I think going back to the Amazon analogy, we're going to end up in the future.
That's really stuck in my head. Yeah,
Stolen.
I'm going to steal that one as well.
We're going to start shipping the products to cows in smaller and smaller packaging, so we have less and less waste to deal with. But we talked about crude protein being all that packaging and amino acids being the building blocks that the cows then use for themselves and for milk production. We have to get a bit smarter about which building blocks they need.
Yep.
And to do that, we need to have a pretty good understanding of what we're actually supplying. And to do that, we have to start really understanding what cows are actually eating. So things like our dry matter intakes become far more important. The dry matters of silages become far more important. The way we analyse the ingredients becomes far more important. But when we can start to do that, we open up a load of doors of being able to target exactly what a cow needs and nothing else and nothing less. And then you can start to move the needle on efficiency. I'm excited for that. I think we're going to learn a lot.
And I guess most dairy farmers will be aware that the methionine and lysine are the two first limiting factors in amino acids in the UK diets. I think around the world, but I think a typical UK grass silage diet is probably only meeting about 75% of the cow's methionine requirement. So that's sort of, some herds are already at that level, but it's the next thing to kind of take it to the masses almost, isn't it?
Yeah, and the one thing I always am careful to say, not being a nutritionist myself, is amino acid balancing involves looking at lots of amino acids rather than just chucking one extra in and hoping it works.
Yeah.
There's a bit more to it than that.
I think we do the cows and ourselves and the products a disservice by just chucking something in hoping for the best.
Yep.
Whereas you need to consider it in the context of the herd, of the cow and the farm situation.
Absolutely.
So in summary, you've been on a bit of it's a cliched saying, but you've been a bit of a journey in terms of protein use efficiency here. What would you say are the highlights on what you've done and what you've achieved here?
I mean, there's no doubt it has been sort of it's been an evolving process. Starting off, as we mentioned at the start, with a decision to ration the cows without soy, and that gets you into a conversation then about getting the most out of forages, but also thinking about the protein sources that we are feeding in terms of feed ingredients. So we started to use AminoMax in early June this year, and that replaced a sort of a protein blend. And with AminoMax, that's a heat-treated rape meal. And that's the process of extrusion then that gives the product its higher bypass or its protection from its rumen protection. And what that does is, again, go back to the Amazon analogy. I'm going to steal that one again. It's packaging up protein into what the cows actually need. And we're really looking for protein that bypasses the rumen as well as the amino acid profile as well. So we were able to reduce the total kilograms of feed protein fed for a smaller package by swapping.
And you can fill that space with more forage or more energy.
Exactly what we did.
From memory, some more maize silage and a little bit more energy source then as well.
Yeah, we've seen big effects on the milk protein over the last few months, actually. I know we mentioned we're at 3.5 now, but we were just over 3 when we started on the AminoMax, weren't we? And so it's been a fairly substantial climb, which has been nice.
And fertilities, butterfat as well. I think we were sort of just under the 4% on butterfat in the month of May. And then again, post introducing AminoMax, I think we've certainly seen that butterfat climbing as well. So the oil, there's a kind oil level in the AminoMax product, and I think that's certainly supported the butterfat, but also the fertility over the summer. Dan, is it?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been steadily improving for quite a while now, actually. So the herd's in quite a
for
nice
many
place.
reasons, I guess. But certainly
there's so
nutrition,
many reasons in all these. But
I think it highlights an important point, though. It's been quite a long process, and you've ticked off a lot of the fundamentals and basics to get right on farm. So looking at the diet, looking at the forages, making sure you've got the right balance of protein there already before we think we're going to solve a problem by adding supplementary amino acids. You need to get the basics right.
One other thing we have done and nailed, and we've not really talked about in this podcast, is alongside a lot of the nutritional strategy, we've worked seriously hard on the cow day and cow comfort. There's been substantial investment in cubicles, in flooring, in fans and stuff. So we've not just focused on the quality ingredients we provide the cow. We've made sure she can A, get to them, which is quite useful, and B, she can actually utilize them herself efficiently as well. So, it is a journey where there's so many different spinning plates, but
Yep.
really you do come back to the basics at the end of it. Can we put quality ingredients in? Can she eat it? Then you start to see the performance fly.
Well, that was certainly a vibrant and insightful conversation. Thank you very much to Grace and to David and to Dan for that. And if you can like and subscribe and share our podcast with your friends, that would be amazing. See you next episode.